Good evening. Tonight we're diving headfirst into something that sounds positively delightful, doesn't it? The Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. Oh, lovely. Images of happy, well-adjusted children frolicking in sun-dappled playgrounds probably spring to mind, perhaps with a government minister gently handing out organic apple slices. But, as is so often the case with legislation dressed in fluffy, benevolent language, if you scratch beneath the surface, and believe me, we've been scratching like a caffeinated badger in a sand pit, you find something far less palatable. In fact, you find something actively, demonstrably, and terrifyingly harmful. Particularly for a specific group of children, this government seems perennially keen to help in all the wrong ways. Let us be unequivocal. The so-called Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill isn't a lifeline. It's a legislative straitjacket designed to entrench systemic racism and suffocate the potential of Black children under the guise of concern. It's the policy equivalent of someone offering you a nice, warm hug while simultaneously picking your pocket and setting fire to your house. This bill, with its vague pronouncements and worryingly broad powers, isn't about fostering genuine well-being. It's about control, about surveillance, and about reinforcing the very barriers that Black children already face every single day in a system that too often views them not as children to be nurtured, but as problems to be managed. And manage them it will, with all the subtlety of a rhinoceros trying to perform ballet. We're talking about a piece of legislation that, under the saccharine banner of care, threatens to unleash a new wave of discriminatory practices. It's a masterclass in legislative misdirection, a wolf in sheep's clothing, or perhaps more accurately, a wolf in a slightly too small, ill-fitting school uniform, trying to convince you it's just here to check on the kids. Well, we're here tonight to unmask that wolf, and frankly, it's got some very familiar, very unwelcome features. So buckle up, because this is going to be one of those rides where the fun part is systematically dismantling deeply problematic government overreach. Now let's delve into the first, particularly insidious tentacle of this legislative octopus, the so-called expanded safeguarding powers. Safeguarding, of course, sounds wonderful. Who wouldn't want children to be safe? It's like being against puppies or sunshine. But the devil, as always, is in the deeply concerning details. This bill proposes to mandate intrusive monitoring of students' online activity, and get this, their home lives, all under the incredibly broad and conveniently undefined banner of well-being. Think of it as your nosy neighbor getting a government mandate and a login to your kid's TikTok. For Black children, this isn't just a minor inconvenience. It's a klaxon, a 5-alarm fire of impending hyper-surveillance and intensified suspicion. Our children, let's be brutally honest, are already navigating a minefield. They are disproportionately targeted by existing school security measures, often facing a heavier police presence within their educational environments than their white counterparts. It's a reality that shapes their daily experience of school from a very young age. And now, with this bill, their private digital spaces, their group chats, their social media, their online explorations of identity, and even the sanctity of their family homes are set to become fresh battlegrounds for scrutiny. It's an open invitation for bias to run rampant, transforming innocent online chatter or cultural expressions into red flags. Imagine a teenager venting about injustice online, for a Black child, that could now trigger a well-being investigation. This isn't safeguarding, it's the school-to-prison pipeline on digital steroids. It's a system primed to misinterpret, to overreact, and to criminalize normal adolescent behavior, especially when that behavior is filtered through the lens of racial bias. Expressions of Black culture, frustrations with systemic inequality, even just kids being kids online, all of it risks being pathologized and funneled into the very systems we know disproportionately harm them. The inevitable outcome? More bias referrals to already overburdened social services, more young Black lives entangled in the criminal justice system, all because someone decided their well-being needed a government-issued microscope. It's a terrifying prospect wrapped in the language of care. And if the thought of constant surveillance wasn't enough to curdle your morning tea, let's examine another gem buried within this bill's platitudes, a renewed, almost fetishistic commitment to high-stakes standardized testing as a core measure of, you guessed it, well-being. Yes, apparently, bubbling in multiple-choice answers under intense pressure is now the gold standard for determining if a child is thriving. It's like measuring someone's happiness by how quickly they can assemble IKEA furniture. It's a fundamentally flawed premise, and one that has a particularly grim history when it comes to Black children. This isn't just an academic exercise, it's a cudgel, and it's being reinforced. For decades, a mountain of research, actual, peer-reviewed, not pulled out of a minister's backside research, has proven that these standardized tests are deeply, structurally, and unashamedly culturally biased. They predominantly reflect white middle-class norms, experiences, and linguistic patterns, not some objective measure of innate intelligence or true potential. For Black children, these tests have consistently served as instruments of failure, not tools of assessment. They are designed in a way that often puts them at an immediate disadvantage, measuring familiarity with a specific cultural context rather than academic ability or, heaven forbid, actual well-being. This isn't a bug, it's a feature of the system. And under this new well-being bill, the results of these inherently flawed tests will be weaponized with renewed vigor. They will be used to label our children as deficient, to justify the chronic underfunding of their schools, and to systematically limit their future educational and career pathways. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, codified into law. The bill essentially legitimizes and strengthens the very tool that has been historically used to manufacture and perpetuate the achievement gap it so disingenuously claims it wants to address. It's like trying to put out a fire with a flamethrower, or diagnosing a headache by repeatedly hitting someone with a hammer. It's absurd, it's damaging, and it's happening under the guise of progress. Now, the bill does, to its credit, pay some lip service to mental health. And who could argue with that? Mental health is, of course, incredibly important. But, and this is a but so large it could have its own postcode, the bill catastrophically, almost willfully, ignores the unique and profound psychological toll that racism inflicts upon Black children. It's like offering a sticking plaster for a compound fracture. The support mechanisms proposed are generic, one-size-fits-all solutions that completely fail to acknowledge the lived realities of navigating a society where your skin color can make you a target from the moment you step outside your door, or even within the classroom. Where, I ask you, is the mandated funding for therapists of color, professionals who might actually share or understand the cultural context of the children they're supposed to be helping? Where are the robust, properly resourced programs designed to specifically address racial trauma, the daily grind of microaggressions, or the psychological impact of seeing people who look like you consistently stereotyped or brutalized in the media? You won't find them. Instead, the bill offers vague promises of support, likely to be delivered by well-meaning but ultimately unequipped professionals who may lack the training or understanding to navigate these complex, racially charged issues. This isn't just an oversight, it's a fundamental flaw. The danger here is immense. Without cultural competence, without a genuine understanding of how systemic racism shapes a Black child's mental and emotional landscape, there's a significant risk of pathologizing their resilience, misinterpreting their reactions to injustice as defiance or behavioral problems. A Black child expressing anger or frustration about racism isn't necessarily displaying a conduct disorder. They might be displaying a perfectly rational response to an irrational and hostile environment. This isn't care, it's institutional gaslighting. It's telling children that their valid experiences of racism are somehow their own individual failings, rather than the failings of a system that perpetuates inequality. It's a recipe for further alienation and harm. Chapter 4, History Class, now sponsored by Amnesia and Whitewash. And just when you thought this bill couldn't get any more creatively destructive, we arrive at the provisions around curriculum control. The bill empowers the government to dictate approved content under those wonderfully nebulous well-being objectives. Now, on the surface, ensuring curriculum contributes to well-being sounds Fine-ish. But given everything else we've seen, you'd be right to suspect this is less about fostering well-rounded individuals and more about ideological enforcement. This is, quite clearly, a thinly veiled attack on the development and implementation of diverse, anti-racist curricula. It's a way to ensure that the version of history and society taught in schools is palatable to those who find uncomfortable truths, well, uncomfortable. Think about what this means in practice. Teaching the unvarnished truth about colonialism, about the brutality of slavery and its enduring legacies, about the rich and often suppressed history of Black British people, all of which are absolutely essential for our children's sense of identity, self-worth, and understanding of the world they inhabit, will likely be marginalized, if not outright discouraged. These critical histories, these vital perspectives that empower Black children and educate all children, could be deemed divisive or detrimental to well-being by a government that seems increasingly allergic to any narrative that doesn't paint a picture of uninterrupted national glory. So, well-being becomes a Trojan horse, smuggling in a mandate for a whitewashed, sanitized narrative that erases Black struggles, Black contributions, and the very concept of systemic racism. How precisely is it conducive to a Black child's well-being to sit in a classroom where their history is ignored, their ancestors' suffering is minimized, and the realities of the racism they may face are denied? It's an act of profound disrespect and psychological harm. It doesn't foster belonging, it breeds alienation, and reinforces the idea that their experiences, their heritage don't matter. This isn't education, it's indoctrination by omission. Chapter 5. The elephant in the classroom. It's made of crumbling budgets, not bad vibes. Perhaps the most glaring, most audaciously cynical aspect of this entire children's well-being in schools bill is what it conspicuously addresses. It spectacularly, almost performatively, ignores the enormous trumpeting elephant in pretty much every under-resourced classroom in the country, crushing child poverty and the deliberate, sustained underfunding of schools, particularly those serving Black communities. You simply cannot legislate well-being into existence while systematically starving schools of the resources they need to actually function, let alone thrive. It's like trying to cure malnutrition with a motivational poster. Imagine a school with crumbling infrastructure, leaking roofs, outdated textbooks, and hopelessly oversized classes. Imagine children coming to that school hungry because their families are struggling to make ends meet. How exactly does a bill focused on digital surveillance and curriculum control address these fundamental material deprivations that have a far more direct and devastating impact on a child's well-being than whether they've learned the correct version of history? This bill offers bureaucratic tinkering, administrative reshuffling, and more layers of scrutiny, not the transformative, sustained investment our schools and our children so desperately need. It's a distraction, a legislative sleight of hand. This isn't just an oversight, it's a deliberate choice to blame children and their families for outcomes that are manufactured by systemic neglect and austerity. Instead of tackling the root causes of inequality, poverty, lack of opportunity, under-resourced public services, this bill focuses on monitoring and managing the children themselves. It's cheaper, I suppose, than actually funding schools properly or implementing policies that lift families out of poverty. But it's also profoundly dishonest and deeply harmful, ensuring that the cycle of disadvantage continues, all while pretending to care about well-being. Chapter 6. Parental Involvement. You can speak, but we're not listening. Finally, let's talk about parents. The bill naturally is peppered with warm, fuzzy rhetoric about parental involvement. Because, of course, what government initiative doesn't claim to want parents involved? It's standard practice, like putting new and improved on a box of cereal that tastes exactly the same. However, when you cut through the jargon and look at the actual mechanisms proposed, a very different picture emerges. This bill doesn't empower parents. It centralizes power, consolidating it firmly in the hands of Whitehall bureaucrats and school authorities. many of whom operate within structures already steeped in unacknowledged or worse, acknowledged but unaddressed bias. The expertise, the lived experience, and the tireless advocacy of Black parents who have been on the front lines for generations, fighting against a rigged system to get the best for their children, will be further marginalized, not amplified. These are parents who know intimately the challenges their children face, who understand the nuances of their cultural context, and who have often had to become de facto experts in navigating discriminatory practices within the education system. Their voices, instead of being centered and respected, risk being drowned out by top-down directives and the professional judgment of those who may not understand or even recognize the validity of their concerns. So despite all the talk of partnership, the reality is that crucial decisions about our children's education, their well-being, their futures, will increasingly be made us, not us. They will be made by distant committees, by officials operating under vague new guidelines, and by school leadership teams who may themselves be under pressure to conform to the bill's problematic framework. This isn't genuine involvement, it's a consultation exercise where the outcome is predetermined. It's a system designed to manage dissent, not to foster genuine collaboration with the very people who care most about these children's futures, their parents and their communities. Outrow, our children, our future, demanding justice, not deception. So, there you have it, the Children's Well-Being and Schools Bill, a piece of legislation that, despite its benevolent branding, poses a clear and present danger to the futures of Black children. It's a masterstroke of misdirection, promising care while delivering control, offering support that risks pathologizing, and championing well-being while entrenching the very systemic inequalities that undermine it. This isn't progress, it's a meticulously crafted step backwards, wrapped in the language of concern, but reeking of discriminatory intent and practice. It's an insult to our intelligence and an assault on our children's potential. We cannot and will not stand idly by while this legislative Trojan horse is wheeled into our schools and communities. The stakes are simply too high. Our children's futures, their mental health, their sense of self, and their right to an equitable and empowering education are on the line. This is not a time for polite disagreement or quiet concern. This is a time for clear, unequivocal, and loud opposition. We must see this bill for what it is, a threat. The Black Child Agenda demands its immediate withdrawal. We demand investment, not intrusion. Culturally competent support, not surveillance. A curriculum reflecting our truth, not enforced erasure. An end to racist testing. Our children deserve justice, not this dangerous farce. They deserve genuine opportunities, authentic care, and an education system that sees them, hears them, and empowers them to thrive, not one that seeks to monitor, manage, and marginalize them further. The fight for their future continues, and it starts with consigning this bill to the dustbin of terrible ideas where it so clearly belongs. Thank you.